like way back, we're like probably 10,000 years BC. They had the story of eagles, and that's why eagles became so important. They were known as these majestic birds, and some said they were actually God's own protectors of the Garden of Eden. They flew so high, no human had ever seen them. So over hundreds of thousands of years later on, like humans began to see them some, and they were kind of stewards of the entire planet. But what happened with interactions with humans, one day they had this expedition, and the humans went on a hunting trip, and they started shooting eagles. So one eagle was shot and wounded, and her name was, actually we got her name Destiny, and she actually she fell down. So she had 2 children, and her husband, which was he came down and developed a whole area of land, so she actually had to do it from the land. When they discovered her, because she was pregnant, she had two what would you call baby eagles?
Eaglets.
Eaglets sound good? Okay, eaglets. So they didn't know what to do with them because they had to move Destiny. So they put them in the hen house because they had a big chicken coop, right? So they put them under the hen house, and these eagles were under the hens. So they were warm and stuff. The hens were real happy about it, because they had these majestic eggs on them. So the hens were really like, they were brags, and ones that had the eagles on them. So the eagles hatched. So they didn't know that they were eagles. So they actually ran around with the chickens. And they learned chicken stuff. They did the same stuff that chickens did. That's what they did. And as they started to grow, actually the chickens started joning on the eagles, like look at that nose, look at that head, oh, so they tried to stick their head down, whatever they could do to look like the chickens. So as they went around, one day, a big male eagle was just like 2-3 miles in the sky, looked down, like, what the heck? He's like, what's the eagles doing with these chickens? So he went down, and all the hens started running toward the chickens started running to the hen house, and he blocked the one chicken. He said, look, man, what are you doing? He said, what do you mean what I'm doing? He's like, you're an eagle. What are you doing right with all these chickens? He's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know anything about eagles. They look at you like me. He's like, I don't know. So he said, well, he thought he was going to trick him. He said, well, since you're an eagle, you're not going to hurt me, right? He said, no, I'm not going to hurt you. He said, well, if you're not going to hurt me, you'll let me go, right? You're not going to stop me. So he said, well, I'll let you go. I'm here to help you. I'm not here to hurt you. So he let him go. So he went into the hen house, talked to the chicken, said, yeah, he outsmarted the father eagle. The idea was, though, he said, the idea of becoming that peace, like if you were to understand what it would be like to not understand your identity, to not understand your role, to not understand your history, that you're actually from a majestic, foundation, then it might be scary to even fly. It might be scary to fly, so maybe we just do chicken stuff. Maybe if I can, if that's what it looks like, maybe that's attractive enough for everybody. Maybe we just don't go back at all, and that's what we do. And if you look now at the behaviors that have become glorified, to me, I cannot believe what we're into, what we find attractive. You really think about it. I'm like, dang, this is destructive. Sometimes, I know you probably do also, probably y'all do say, are we preparing young brothers for jail or college? Like the whole idea of going hard. You ask a youngin' like, no, man, I go hard. And it's a pause, he go hard, he gangster. Even the idea of being a killer, having bodies, like, man, he's a killer. That's something you say about a pit bull. But it's like, the idea of it is a positive, it's not a negative. So, in a community, being a killer of people in your community is a positive. Now, how many have read 1984 book? Anybody else? 1984? It's a book. There's some lines in it. Ignorance is strength, poverty is wealth, war is peace, The language is double speak.
Freedom is slavery.
Freedom is slavery. George Orwell. George Orwell. It was a book called 1984, and he wrote about what it would be like. And the idea was Big Brother. What it, it would actually, if we allowed the government to institutionalize the mindset of humanity, what it would actually be like in 1984. And when was the book written? It was 1950s? What the book? In the 1950s. But this language, think about it. War is peace, freedom is slavery, poverty is wealth. The crimes were thought crimes. So if they catch you thinking, they actually, as you look at the TV is looking at you. And they tell you all kinds of stuff, but it's looking at you. If you think, it's a crime. It's a thought crime. Like, it's not too different than the way I feel sometimes out here every day. So when I go to colleges, I think that this is where the thought's going to come from. Because this is probably the only point that you don't have anything to lose. Also, being at the community college level, you actually have an upper hand. Because you have the opportunity now, one, you want to leave with an AA and then get to go on. But you get to figure it out. If you go straight to the 4-year process, you really don't get a chance to figure it out like on the way. And you don't get anything as you go. So now it's like, what are y'all about? Like Brother Mean said, what are you made of? Who are y'all? You know what I mean? And that's why it's so important to hear something back from y'all as we have these kind of discussions, because I want to know, what are y'all made of? What are y'all thinking about now? What do y'all want to become? What's important to y'all? What's really important? What are you willing to sacrifice? What's so important that you sacrifice something for the future? And that's the kind of stuff we want to hear, just the makeup of where y'all coming from. So, and that's really the core of Find Your Eagle. Where I'm at now, I'm in the last chapter. It's like really, what is making it me? Because I really didn't have a model for making it. Like, I was the only brother in our entire graduate program. So anytime they asked me anything, I was speaking for all the black people in the world. Every question is like, whatever they asked me, what I felt about it. And I'm a psychologist, which, that was the field that, I found it interesting. But I found at the PhD level, we weren't present. And right now, in the communities, I don't see no more psychologists in the communities. None of my colleagues, we all teaching at universities. Where we're needed, we're not really present. So that's why it's so important to connect with y'all. So tell me a little about y'all. Who are y'all? And that's a wild question. I was like, well, where we start? Where we start? Just like, what are you made of? I'm made of something. I know what it is. What is it? Like, tell me a little about y'all. Like, what are y'all, where are y'all going? What are y'all thinking about?
Future.
The future, yeah. What about the future? What does it look like?
And how can I be an asset to somebody besides myself?
Okay.
Because I want to be a psychologist.
You be a psychologist? Okay. Okay. What does being an asset? Somebody tell me what being an asset means to them. And she said, like, being an asset, I'm going to be an asset. Somebody else, what does that mean? What does that mean to y'all, being an asset? Yeah.
Being an asset to someone is like always, well, not always, but being able to have something to share with somebody, something that'll help them, something that they can use, like whether it's a skill, whether it's a little bit of advice that you can give them, or just being you. Even being you can also be an asset. It can inspire. Like, that's what I think being an asset to someone is. You can be an asset to someone without them even knowing it.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, just being an example, one of the things that is so important for me, because I do some community stuff, is that, you be an example for people, and you talked about the younger people and how the younger people glorify some of the negatives and flip it. I got a daughter, 31, believe it or not, and a son, 23. Mm-hmm. And some of the terms that my son uses, I'm like, where'd that come from? Yeah. So he break it down, because even when I was 23, I had a terminology that my parents couldn't understand. So, instead of leading and or scolding him to the point where you shouldn't and you couldn't, why do you? I kind of join him in his efforts to let me know who he is. And I I lead by example by saying, well, Dulo, that's his nickname, Stephen, you know, I'd rather for you to wear your pants up with your buckle on your belt fastened and your shirt, you know, put in your pants because it represents me. You know what I'm saying? And when you go somewhere, at least when you look for a job, you know, you're looking well. So instead of saying, man, you need to pull your pants, you know, dogging him, you know, I kind of meet him at where he's at, you know, and like I said, teaching by example. Because people, I mean, even the students around here, they look at some of us older students, and if in fact you acting a fool, they have no respect for you.
Okay.
So even in class, you know, it's a few young brothers that I've talked to, you know, they say, well, you know, I don't really say nothing to the older dudes because they don't have nothing to say to me. So if you don't lead by example, how can somebody follow you?
It's a piece of leadership. What's leadership? Okay, yeah.
I wouldn't tell someone to follow. I would use what I've been through to inspire them, but I can't exactly tell someone you have to follow what I do. No, because you want that person to do just as well or even better. So you want to motivate them. It's not exactly be like me. Because you have your own path. But you want to show that person that, okay, they might be down or discouraged or think that they can do something. So I think leadership is about inspiring someone, not necessarily trying to get them to be like you or a clone of you or to be better than you, but to show them that when they get discouraged, that there is a chance to rebuild again.
Okay,
I think
okay.
that's what it is.
Yeah. Rebuilding. All right. Yeah, that's excellent. And I mean, really, I kind of want to sum it up. I want to tie it back into history, because this is a celebration of Black history. Is it even important now? I mean, do y'all see the same thing I'm seeing, that it's being trivialized now? It kind of just goes by. It's not really being made significant now. Every year it seems to go down further and further. Y'all seeing that also? What do you think? Like, why is that? Why do you think that is? Is it we had a Black president, they said we don't need it anymore? Like, is that it? What do y'all think? What's your thoughts about it?
You mean like have they minimized African Americans?
Yeah, you said pretty much like, yeah, it's like it's not being made to be significant now, or it's not being acknowledged even.
Well, I think significance starts with you. You know, and who was on TV the other day? Monique was on TV. She's doing a little insert on Black history. It starts with you every day. You know, we look at it one day out of the year, which is the shortest month out of the year, but it starts with you every day. When you wake up and you look in the mirror, you say to yourself, I'm a Black African American man, or how you want to identify, you know, and what do you do to tap into your heritage? I mean, me on a daily, I don't look at, okay, in February, this is what I'll do for that month. I look at, you know, being a part of the African American community on a daily basis. Now, am I always so agreeable with some of the things my African American brothers and sisters do? No, I'm not. But, you know, I tap into it every day.
Okay. Is there a need for it? Would you say there's a need? Is there a need to have even Black History Month celebration? I mean, are there any education majors in here? Okay, speak from the lens of like Carter G. Woodson to now, like so miseducation of the Negro to the present, like, and his premise was actually like we're in a process where you may not be learning the foundational criteria that you need to go back and actually give back and be inspired in your community. Like, where do you think we at now?
Okay, honestly, like, well, from my point of view as a young Black male who will be working with, you know, other children who are Black and brown, which is like, you know, Black children, and like those who are Latino, like there, you know, still is a need to have someone who they can relate to, to tell them their history, so that way they know how far they have come and like what they need to do to go past this. Because like, because like even though we have a Black president, like that does nothing to solve the issue that our home front is not taking care of. Because like, clearly, like there should be like there need to be more people in this room to like hear about these things. Because like clearly we don't learn enough about this in school. Because like right now in college, like I'm required to take a class called U.S. History 1 and 2. But why can't I be required to like take a class on about like natives or the Chicano, Mexicanos, or even like Black history for my major. But that's one thing that I feel that we need to do as people and minorities. We need to like fight for our rights to have our voice heard properly in a school setting. Because I don't care about U.S. history 1 or 2 or anything about the white America. Because clearly I'm not white and I'm not affected by some of the issues. I care more about my people, where I came from. And I want to see my people go farther than what where we have. And I think it's important to stress the fact that when I do go into classroom as a Black male, I will bring something different that the white teachers cannot. I bring those trials and tribulations that that we read about in the books, where they only talk about it from their view. Okay, well, the textbook they say that Black people did this, slavery was this, that, third. I can say, well, I know people who've done this. I know people who had to fight adversity and racism and all that stuff. Also, like, I lived in Germany, so I clearly know what racism is, and I clearly know how to talk about that. But I think that there still is a place for it. However, we don't need to shun from it and say, oh, we have a Black president. Yes, we have hip hop made. We're more mainstream. I think that we're mainstream in the popular sense. However, we're not mainstream in the fact that we are on the forefront of people's minds, in a sense. I don't know if that's
Oh, that's excellent. I mean, excellent point. Yeah.
Can I just
Oh man, where you get out?
and I know because I do a lot of talking.
Okay.
But I just need to say that, I was looking around me and my little crew here.
Yeah.
Because I need them bad. But I was looking around, I said, this room should have been probably spewing out the doors, but it's not. So it is what it is. But this is the thing. I think oftentimes we focus on Black history as we look back towards slavery and what the white man did and all of these things. But, look at it from the perspective of what are we doing today in our communities? What are we doing for our sisters? What are we doing for our brothers? What are we doing for our children? I've been advocating and volunteering for an Latino agency for over a year now with no money, right? But the significant part of that is that the advocacy is for people of color. You see what I'm saying? The compassion, the commitment, the community, the support, it's because that's what we do for each other. You see what I'm saying? So I think the focus of, should we be concentrating on the history of African Americans versus, the concern for African Americans? I live right by Howard. I come on my door every day, and for the last 3 months, this brother that lives next to me, I speak and he never speaks. So the other day I made it my point. I said, brother, I'm always speaking to you. Is everything okay? And I'm kind of arrogant at the time. But he said, no, I'm all right, man. I just don't want to be bothered. I said, well, I ain't trying to hurt your feelings, but I just think, by you living next door, in case something happens, we may need each other. And see, I think that's what people of color have forgot to do with each other. We forget somehow the concern for one another. Even when you come in this building, the concern, some people will speak, some people won't, some professors will speak, some don't, and what happens is you build up this invisible resentment for no reason. And all it takes is a simple gesture or a simple nod to let you know, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I support you. I love you.
Don't you feel that? Well, like we talk about the history. You say, well, if we concentrate on the condition and the concerns and not really the history, then that would that's where our focus should be.
Well, I guess I should reiterate, not so much just concentrate on the concern, but the history is the history. What I'm saying is, right now today, we have such a major concern in the people of color community. That's why I wear this. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
People of color. I got a friend that makes these t-shirts, these shirts and these sweatshirts, because this is my plea to the world. Is people of color, we all come together and support each other right now.
Yeah, but and the question is isn't the history itself, the knowledge of history, wouldn't that be the reason why you're able to connect that way? Like if you understood the history and the sacrifices that your ancestors made on your behalf, then you wouldn't have the right to not connect. You wouldn't have the right to shun another brother or sister that you saw because the sacrifices that were made of the people that came before you. If you have no knowledge of what happened before you, your accountability is to commercialism. So you're accountable to whatever the next commercial is. And when I look and I see people, I can see the commercials. I can see the characters that are put out in front because people model them. I don't see anybody modeling modeling Malcolm X right now. Like, it's hard to see a dashiki these days. I refuse to take, but that's why I went all the time. Like, it's hard to see now. Because, like, you know, nobody's making it popular in commercial culture. So where does our culture, like, where is it? Is it now interwoven into materialism and commercialism?
But that's the question. Is the dashiki who you are?
Does it represent, like, in the village?
Make me understand.
They'll actually weave, like say the elders in the community, they'll weave their images into the actual fabric that they wear. So the actual fabric means something. It's not even just that. Like, you know, like even in biblical history, Moses, the Hebrew cloth that he wore, like he took it off because it meant something. It's like the history of the material. It's like we're like you wearing that because it means something.
But,
the image means
I
something.
guess the point I'm trying to make is, you know, let's talk about Ward 7 and 8, for instance. I did some work in Ward 7 and 8, and some of the people that I work with oftentimes struggle with literacy issues. Mm-hmm. So if I'm saying, and if I'm enforcing or emphasizing, you know, the education piece, and you know, read the book and get your history, and what you're saying is important. I'm not negating that at all. Extremely important. Hey. But I said my approach and the advocacy and approach that I have went and kind of really captured some people and found out where they was at from literally, you know, being a little more compassionate, showing, you know, through my own experience, strength, and my hope that they'll get better right now, right here, because oftentimes people can't relate to that. And I got, you know, some young folks that I work with that never, ever went to the African American Museum or even did a whole lot of things down on the mall that's right here from DC. You see what I'm saying? So I think, you know, sometimes we have to, you know, not concentrate on 40 or 50 years ago for those who can't relate and concentrate some of this stuff like right now, issues that are major concerns.
Okay.
If I could, I'd like to just throw something out, you know, as food for thought. Everyone in here knows what a quilt is, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
What kind of fabric is a quilt? I'm talking about the quilt that your grandmother used to make. What kind of fabric is a quilt made out of?
It's all kinds of fabric, isn't it?
What color is it?
It's a lot of colors.
So a bunch of fragmented pieces of different texture, different hue, different colors, all coming together to make one garment, one piece, right? And Aristotle said, one man, one art. You guys are the change makers in this room,
That's
right?
right.
And one thing I want you to do for me, and please, even if you just do it for 1/2 an hour or whatever, the DC City Council is currently going through what's called the annual agency performance and budget hearings, oversight and budget hearings. Right now, and I think most of us live in DC, right now you got a group of people who are discussing that some people say $10.9 billion, some people say $12 billion budget, right? Pay attention to that. When we talk about history, let's not be charged 20 years from now by our children with not preserving the legacy of this institution, of UDC.
That's right.
Let's not be charged by our children with letting this opportunity pass, right? Preserve UDC, preserve the community college. I mean, you have a voice. When we talk black history, you are you're a footnote on history. And however large or expansive that be will be determined by you. How relevant do you want to be, right? Malcolm X wanted to be relevant enough to read and memorize a dictionary. Dr. King wanted to be relevant enough to put his life on the line. And so, you know, my thing, and when I look at the faces in this room and I hear what you guys are saying, it lifts my heart with joy. I say, wow, okay. In spite of what they say, there is a brighter tomorrow. I mean, I'm sitting here listening to this young lady, and I want to ask her, if I may, I don't want to put you on the spot. What are you studying? Thank God. Boy, look. I mean, when I'm listening to you guys, the gentleman over here, I'm like, wow, you know, don't let anybody trick you into believing that you can't be the defining factor in the room. You can be the defining factor in the room.
That's so true. Yeah, in the back. Look at that. Right here, then right here. Yes.
I used to work for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Pennsylvania. I used to work for the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Okay.
And there is a radio personality who's still on the radio. His name is Reggie Bryant. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He does Now, I heard you were speaking about Malcolm X and speaking about the Daishiki. Well, everybody, you know, as we know, Malcolm X is still an African American. He's not American. I mean, he's not African. Even though we know that the cloth of the Daishiki represents the cloth of Africa. You know, and we all want to identify ourselves since we changed, since we talk about history. We changed from the word, which was considered to be the N word. We changed from trying to graduate to the B word. Then we graduated from the B word to the African American word. Well, I'm married to an African descent, and I'm married in the land of Africa. And I'm married into 2 tribes of royalty in that country. But what I wanted to say is that just because Malcolm, and I have been of various religious orders, I have been of a Christian, my family was born, a Baptist, you know, realm. I chose at once upon a time to become a Methodist. Then I changed later to become a Catholic. Then I later changed to become Islam. But I do this now. But I am a Black American. But I also married an African descent. But now when we talk about identity, we all want to identify ourselves by someone that we can relate to. And sometimes clothing gives us the connection to that. Religion may give us connection to that, just like we have a connection to our mother or our father. But when you talk about the clothing, I feel as though, and some others may feel, others may not identify themselves and think I need to walk around here wearing a daishiki.
Oh, yeah,
Some
evident.
do.
Yeah.
And when I really brought up the fact we're talking about, I worked for the Enquirer in Philadelphia, there was a young man that got on the television, on the radio, right? Because you could call in and you can connect with the speaker. And they were talking about Bill Cosby as well, too, because it was a big stir during this particular time about Bill Cosby, talking about the guys with the baggy pants and things like that. So anyway, so this young man called in, and it really stirred up a very big controversy in the city with people calling in. This young individual says, and he's going to be a journalist. And he applied to be for a journalist working for the Philadelphia Enquirer as well. And he said, I don't feel as though that Martin Luther King did anything to benefit me. He said because what Martin Luther King may have had going on, or Malcolm X or any of them, was at that time for them, not for me. And, you know, and he had a right to that. Because to him, in his sense, regardless of what our progress is, we still have progress yet to go, and we'll still have more progress yet to go. And our history is still taunt and tamed and stained, and tears and bloodshed is still being shed. You understand what I'm saying? So that's my point.
But I think, I think that definitely speaks to individualism. And, that is, this society, the ideology is individualism and capitalism. But what we have to determine is, did that work for us? Like, so we can say that I have a right as an individual to say that nobody did nothing for me. Nobody came before me, did anything for me. I did it all myself, and I'm getting mine. You know how many times I've heard that? I'm getting mine. I'm doing me. If I'm doing me, how we ever going to be all right? I'm doing me. So if I'm doing me in a relationship, if that's my attitude going in a relationship, if I'm doing me, then we okay as long as you doing something that's promoting me. But if we got to struggle, I'm out. It's no struggle because we also the saying I can do bad by myself. I'm not willing to struggle with you for anything. So if we going down, if it's not all gravy, then I ain't willing to go through it. So we're back to what are you made of? So that's why I stress the importance of identity first. When I work with the young people, before we do anything, we know who you are. If you don't know your eagle, we can't start the process until you understand who you are. And, without that, then you shaky later on.
But I think that it takes life to understand who you are. Because as you go through life, you start to understand who you are. And I feel like as you go through life, you're study growing. You're study being that person that you dreamed of being. Because if you don't
experience life and you don't have anything to talk about. Like you're up here talking to us, but you can relate that to us because of what you've been through and what you've experienced. So I think that with life, it takes that for us to figure out who we are as young people. Because we're still, some of us, you know, we are trying to figure out who we are. And as we go through life, we're going to gradually continue to build on who we are. But we still have to find that out by going through life.
Right, and I agree with you.
I
But
think life is there.
yeah, but I don't think you can experience life without history. Like, you can go through life every day, but if you don't have a foundation of history, where are the dreams coming from? If your dreams are coming from your everyday experience and you don't have a history to tap into, then your dreams are coming from the here and now. And, you know, without that foundation, it's hard to really get it grounded. What are you standing on? Whose shoulders are you standing on? Yeah, yes, sir.
Back to your very first question about is Black history become less important, or is it not as prevalent as it was? As I look back over the evolution of this whole madness, when we were in a point like the late 60s and early 70s, some things happened in our communities that we should be very closely aware of, and that was that the drugs, the sex, and the violence became predominant. It became such that a young man was more prone to wear the badge of honor of Lawton and some teardrops down his side for how many bodies that he had. Yeah. This was all because the media portrayed us in a certain way, and rather than it being life imitating art, it was art being imitated by life. We cannot discount the amount of drug activity, the amount of our people who went to jail and are still dealing with these long prison sentences during that period of time. The family units broke down. There were too many single family mothers out there. And a lot of this, if you look at it, it seems to be intentional. Like, why would you make it such that anything can be seen on TV? How can a child look at a TV and they can see anything? I mean, absolutely, it was not always that way, but it seemed to follow the course of the large amount of drugs coming into the neighborhood, the violence being portrayed on TV, and things like our nature and our culture became less important. But I don't believe you can go through life without knowing your history. I was fortunate to have a Black Studies class here that was much more in depth than I had even back in the 70s when I first started college. So what I'm saying is important. I look at this as being a resurgence, really. And if we can get hold of people here, and I totally believe in saving our historically Black colleges and universities, because they started out fighting this, and it would be good for us to continue it all the way through and catch those people who are going to get back from the rebound of this whole violent lifestyle, and then go back to try to learn what their culture actually is so they can fly like eagles.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah.
This is a very, very interesting thing, because when Black history comes up, it touches a lot of factors all across the board. And I'm a civil rights individual, and I did a lot of civil rights work, and I'm going to be a civil rights attorney as well, too.
Excellent.
And I like to be very careful with this word talking about Black and Black history, because number one, if I'm in the box of being Black, our race must be preserved as being Black. I don't think, and you want to sit and you want to talk about preserving Black history and knowing where we come. Yes, I want to know where I came from, and that's a wonderful thing. But that does not mean that for me to be who I am and know where I came from, and to continue the trailblaze, because I'm a leader, I'm not going to be a follower. Does not mean that I got to do anything to make a family, and then I want to consider and call that Black history, because it's not. And just because our text may tell us that we got to take and read things a certain line, we still controlled by who we have to follow those texts by still. And then on top of that even after we have these accomplishments, you know, it's not about being racism. The fact, the truth is the truth. Because different people, they want to really accept certain things to really navigate as I'm getting along. I'm being part of the norm because this is my growth of advancement. I don't see it that way.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's why these conversations are so important, and that's really why this is the format even of this discussion is because many times we go through it, we never have a discussion. We never hear different perspectives. We never get, different ideas because there are all kind of perspectives. Like, say again?
You don't really, I think you're so busy caught up in what's going on with us, so we forget to speak amongst one another and to actually, like you said, to be friendly. It's okay to go up and say, how are you doing? But everybody's looking down on each other. I think now we're losing the compassion part of it. And I think that's why, and I think that, yes, we do need to know where we come from, but I think we're losing the compassion part of it.
I agree.
I think that's my point of view.
Okay.
The main issue that the black community have is that we don't help each other out. Every other race are sticking together and helping each other out when they're down. I can't go up, like, say if I do the job, I can't go up to somebody and say, oh, can you help me with this job? They always want something out of the deal. And that's the problem with the black community. They do not help each other out whatsoever. They rather see somebody else fall, rock bottom before they even help.
Do you think that's the I'm doing me piece? Is that the individualism piece? Is that because I'm doing me, then I really can't extend myself to you? Is it connected?
Honestly, I don't even know.
Okay.
I don't have no problem helping somebody else out without anything in return.
Yeah. I see the same thing. I'm gonna go, let me go, she hasn't said anything yet. Then I'm right here, then right there.
Wonderful co-worker here, and we certainly consider ourselves women of wisdom. And I was just thinking, the subtopic of your wonderful book that I would love to read should be, can an eagle still fly if the wing has been broken into pieces? And what I'll say to this young lady here, whether someone in our community helps us out or not, you have to figure out how to take the broken pieces, whether it's a job or whatever, and you have to figure out how to put that puzzle together on your own, even if it's a missing piece. Because either way, you're going to be successful.
Wow, that's a beautiful piece. That's a beautiful piece. Right here, then right there. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that I had a praying grandmother. I like what you said, women of wisdom, because she was truly a wise woman. And see, it's those nights, 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning when we sat at the kitchen table, and she told me, when I said I can't, she said I can, and I never forgot that. So, again, I go back to, it was other people. And I heard you when you said you got to do it yourself, you got to put it back, you got to mend the wing. One of my favorite gospel songs is Encourage Yourself. But oftentimes, I'm going to tell you, and I know it from my own personal experience, oftentimes, that is probably the roughest, hardest thing to do when you've been broke down. But there's usually people, if we allow ourselves to reach out or extend ourselves